It's curious to me that the world is enthralled with the crypto and the blockchain and this and that, but we've been there since the early 80s doing a very similar service for businesses across the globe. So, I think we have an opportunity now like we've never had before because of the focus on the notion of alternative payment systems and whatnot.
Welcome to Business X. If you are a first-time listener, well, welcome. We love all our business listeners here. Thank you for joining us today. My sensational co-host, Jeff, and our fabulous guest, Mr. Ron Whitney, CEO and President of IRTA. Welcome all.
Thank you, Caroline. Pleasure to be here.
Lovely, lovely. Ron, we are very honored to have you here on our wonderful Roadshow podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself and IRTA.
Well, my background is in insurance and law. In my 20s, I was a claims adjuster for an insurance company, went to law school at night, thought I'd perhaps tear up the legal profession, but decided I wasn't that crazy about it. So I moved on to higher education and worked for a university and did some entrepreneurial things there and started my own marketing company in the early 90s and then moved on to starting a barter exchange. I had heard about barter exchanges. I had this marketing company I had was doing one-on-one trades for advertising. So I'd get a $5,000 credit at a nice restaurant, but I couldn't spend it all myself. But I heard about barter exchanges and I did a lot of due diligence and decided to take the plunge in 1993 and started my own barter exchange in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. Then I wound up on the IRTA board in the early 2000s and was elected to be the executive director back then in 2007. I thought it was going to be a 6-month stint. I've been there 16 years now, and I love it because I believe in barter to the bottom of my toes.
Ron, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. For the benefit of people who aren't familiar with what IRTA is, can you tell us what that acronym stands for?
Sure.
And how has IRTA evolved since you've been at the helm?
Sure. It stands for the International Reciprocal Trade Association. It was formed in 1979 in the US. Its purpose is to basically protect, preserve, and enhance the barter industry globally through, proactive advocacy and education. So we're all about getting the word out about the benefits of the barter industry to businesses, and we take it very seriously. How it's evolved, the basic business model is pretty much the same as it was in 1979. The changes have been, it was legalized in the United States through the TEFRA Act in 1982, and we continue to grow as an industry. We do over 12 to 14 billion a year globally. We guesstimate. It's a good guesstimate. And there's different sectors of barter, but IRTA focuses mainly on the retail sector, barter exchanges in various towns and cities across the globe.
Okay, thanks.
Fabulous, Ron. Isn't it just exciting when you hear how impactful the trade industry is? Some of those numbers, and I know we guesstimate. Would you say it's a conservative guesstimate?
I think it's probably right on target, actually. That includes counter trade and corporate trade, which do trades usually much larger than a retail barter exchange does. So, but the difficulty in getting statistics on our industry is most of these companies are privately held. And so they're not publishing their financials. And it's just difficult to really get a clear sense of the amount of transactions that are occurring. But, it's incredible in additional business that these business owners are getting above and beyond what they do in the cash world.
Yeah.
So,
Ron, I want to shift gears for a second here. One of the things that we want to emphasize on the Business X Exchange is that we can make mistakes and bounce back from them.
Mhm.
And so we're asking our guests to share with everybody something funny that's happened to them in business. Now,
Mhm.
when I shared mine, Ron, you should know it was funny, bad, it was embarrassing, but I did pick myself up literally. I'd
Right.
fallen down off a stage. So I literally did. So what would be something that you would want to share with everybody, something funny that might have happened to you in
Well,
your career?
understand, first of all, of course, the organized barter industry practices third-party bartering, okay? Meaning you don't have to buy from the company that you sold to. You basically have an account, like a credit card account, you accumulate trade credits, and you can spend them on anybody in the system. So, when you really look at it from a macro level, we're sort of an alternative legal payment system. You can pay in cash, you can pay in trade, or you can pay with barter through an organized barter exchange. All right, so with that in mind, a barter exchange is sending buyers to sellers all the time, and there's thousands of transactions taking place. So when I had my barter exchange, occasionally I'd get a call at 8:30 at night from a member who would start yelling at me that he was at one of my barter restaurants, but his steak wasn't cooked right. So, I'd say, well, wait a minute, Jimmy. If you're in the cash world, what do you do when the waiter brings you the steak that's not cooked right? So I complain to the waiter, or I complain to the maitre d'. So I said, well, Jimmy, have you done that? Well, no, because this is your restaurant. No, when the steak is cooked wrong, you don't call Visa, right? So, same kind of thing with a limo driver I had, who one of my clients trashed the limousine. She called me up on Monday and said, I'm getting out of this barter exchange. It's terrible. Your person trashed my limo. I said, well, I got to believe that in the cash world, somebody's trashed your limo before.
Yeah.
And she said, well, sure. I said, well, what do you do then? She said, I fine him $250. I said, fine my guy $250. So finally that starts sinking in, but those are just fun little stories that we have to deal with all the time.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Yeah. Now, the trade industry, Ron, obviously has evolved. How do you feel about where it's heading? And where do you see that it could possibly go in the future?
Well, I couldn't be more bullish on our industry. We need to get the word out, more aggressively as best we can. It's curious to me that the world is enthralled with the crypto and the blockchain and this and that, but we've been there since the early 80s doing a very similar service for businesses across the globe. So, I think we have an opportunity now like we've never had before because of the focus on the notion of alternative payment systems and whatnot, because that's what we are when you really break it down. So remember, it's that unused capacity that most all businesses have that drives this whole barter business. If we can get a business 10 to 15% more business a year through barter, it's a beautiful thing, because then they go out and buy goods and services with that new trade credit they earned, and they buy things that they used to pay, with cash. So now they have more cash in their bank account. It helps you preserve your cash. And those are huge benefits that the world needs to know about. And when they understand it, they will get involved and the industry will grow.
Yeah. Ron, one thing I'm wondering about is you've been involved in the world of trade exchanges, barter exchanges for many years now. You started in the 90s.
Mhm.
What would be a lesson that you've learned, Ron? I'm sure you've learned many lessons, but what would be a lesson that you've learned that you would like to share with people who maybe are very experienced in this stuff, or maybe they're just getting to know about it, that might save them a little bit of time or effort?
Well, I think people need to understand that, not only can a barter exchange bring you business, it can really enhance your lifestyle as well. So again, if you're bringing that business owner 15% more business a year, they can do things that they never were able to do before. Just the simplest things. Many people involved with barter never pay cash for their family vacations. They never pay cash for their children's braces. I didn't. And what does that do? That enhances your lifestyle. It's a beautiful thing. That's from the barter member perspective. From the barter exchange owner perspective, it's critical that they educate their members constantly in terms of understanding how to use the system for the greatest benefit. For instance, we talk about members have to understand they need to be flexible with their purchasing needs. Okay. I always told my members, give me a list of 6 things you'd like to buy on trade. I can't get you all 6 probably, but what if I can get you 4? That's still a win-win for everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're that member who wants a 1972 mint condition MG midget, you're probably going to get a little frustrated because that's hard to come by anywhere, let alone in a barter exchange.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the great things that we are all experiencing now is that the push from all places to, revitalize circular economies. And that is, I think, a great byproduct of COVID. But, for our industry, it's what we've been doing for so many years. But there's a huge focus now on education at universities, at schools, of the whole importance of it, growing businesses with communities, using this whole concept of supporting each other to conserve cash, to grow businesses, and I think that's why not only Ron's bullish, but all of the IRTA community's bullish, and so many exchange owners are bullish in this market.
Right. And you hear the phrase all the time, buy local.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
We've been doing that since 1980. Barter exchanges and creating local economies all across the globe.
Yeah.
So,
how many of the, I know retail is IRTA's more focus. Roughly how many exchanges, retail exchanges are there across the globe at the moment?
Well, in the US, we guesstimate around 300, 325.
Wow.
Around the world, that's a little tougher to get a handle on, maybe a couple hundred more, and obviously, like any other industry, you're looking for a good barter exchange. The quality can vary, whether you're dealing with lawyers, accountants, or grocery stores. So you want to make sure to do your due diligence and pick a good barter exchange, talk to some members, and make a good decision. But the benefits of participation are endless. It's something that is a basic tool that every small business owner should have in their arsenal. And the other thing is the credit line that we offer, which is huge. Barter exchanges offer credit to allow credit-worthy companies to buy goods and services above what they've earned. And I have stories about that too, but.
Yeah. And that's just such an essential part of business, isn't it? Allowing yourself access to credit and capital to keep growing. It's just an essential need that the barter businesses and the trade businesses have been supplying for so many years. And I have to concur with Ron. We have some of our first original members that we're coming into our 30th year this year. Their kids are now running businesses, and they've become members of ours. So. The need for a good exchange can continue for generations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ron, I would want to ask you, as the head of the International Reciprocal Trade Association, taking it beyond what Caroline had asked you before about the future, and I know you're very optimistic about the future. If we handed you an Aladdin's lamp,
mm-hmm.
and you had a wish, which we could also call, Ron, a goal. In a few years, we'll say in 5 years, what would you like to see happen with the whole trade exchange IRTA, industry? What would you want to have happen?
Well, I would love to see the financial world, the more traditional financial world, embrace our industry and recognize that it's a wonderful model that can increase their profits and provide an incredibly important community service at the same time. We've never had, Chase Manhattan or whoever come and partner with our industry.
Yeah.
And, that would be something that could help launch it to a whole nother level. And with that, as you scale up, you could do some consolidation in the industry rather than have 200 exchanges with separate private, trade credits. You could maybe boil it down to 2 or 3 types of trade credits throughout the globe. So I'm still optimistic that we can do that.
Yeah.
Part and parcel, because there's some, as we've seen certainly in the last 10 days, some serious concern about, the typical financial system out there. So actually what we do would provide an interesting backup to the traditional financial model. So
Sounds like a very good wish, Ron.
well, got to think big. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
something to shoot for. It's not just a wish. It's something that I know that you're working towards. You and the association are working towards that. Yeah.
I mean, you have an industry that was accepted by the IRS back in 1982 in the US, for heaven's sakes. Build on that. Build on that.
Yeah.
That's legitimacy right there. So
Yeah, and I can speak obviously for all the other acceptance, in some of the other territories. Whilst we may have had to file for some in some of the areas that we operate BBX in general, most governments have legalized trading, and trade credits many, many years ago.
Right.
It's definitely an industry that has just floated along organically. I like to call it organically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's just primed, and I don't understand why the traditional finance system hasn't grasped it earlier. And people always say to me that for the first 20 years of our business, we had to explain to people that there were other things out there, different payment methods outside of cash. Now we've just leapfrogged into this world where there's so many payment methods that it's becoming confusing and it's disruptive and it's dangerous, and we're sort of stuck in the middle. So I'm hoping that there'll be a bit of a regroup to come back, and traditional markets, like Ron, will pick up, where we're positioned in the middle.
exactly. Yeah.
And one of the things I would say that I'm very excited about with this Business X podcast and having people like you, Ron, on, people of your caliber, is, and you alluded to this, the amount of education that is needed to help people better understand what the whole industry is about. And I will be the first to admit that I was ignorant about this until I had Maria Worth on my podcast. And wow, I knew nothing about this 12 to 14 billion dollar industry. And I don't consider myself to be an ignorant human being. I'm pretty ignorant about certain things, but what's going on in the world, I'm usually pretty familiar with. And yet I didn't know about this. And I'm hoping that through what you're saying and what we're going to share on this podcast, a lot more people are going to become familiar with the whole concept of it.
Well, hopefully increasing awareness in the general public is a big challenge for us. We do have limited resources in some respect. We can't buy a 30-second slot on the Super Bowl, but maybe someday we can. But you got to increase that awareness. I mean, Caroline, my understanding is that the business awareness of the barter model in Australia and New Zealand is maybe around 30 or 40%.
I think we'd put it in there, but in most territories, I think corporates have been doing their own contra barter programs themselves. So the corporate sector is more aware, I believe, than the retail business sector.
Right.
And when you boil it down, Facebook buy, swap and sell is your consumer sector. So, consumers are already trading and swapping with each other. And, the concept now that these consumers can become freelancers and become, part of regulated trade associations and organizations. And then obviously as they develop into businesses, SMEs, they're getting larger credit lines, and then into enterprises where it becomes a whole, international expanded opportunity as they go through the world. So now we're in a position that people are starting to go on these journeys all the way through, and they've come into it from different platforms. And this whole education and guest that we'll have on Business X is really to make people understand you may be doing this as yourself on buy, swap and sell community site. And if you register as a business, make sure that you go into one of the regulated exchanges, because it can really help your business grow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this freelancer economy that we have moved into can only be a boon to this, as long as the word gets out to the freelancer community that this is out there for them.
Yeah, and that brings up the proposition of creating barter systems and exchanges for various segments of industries and verticals. So take, for instance, the contracting field. I mean, you could do that with just that. You can do that with doctors. You can do that with the medical. I would love to see it evolve to that point where IRTA would play a role assisting those various industries to set up their own internal systems from top to bottom. It's totally doable, and it's beneficial. Lots of neat things can happen in the future. We're determined to make them happen. So
I'll bet you are, and good reasons to be hopeful, Ron. Good reasons to be hopeful.
Yeah. Well, I had a conversation with a gentleman from a top 3 accounting firm a couple weeks ago. He said, "You guys might be sitting on the best thing out there right now."
Yeah.
With this financial mess that's going on.
Yeah.
He said, "You might find that, in the next 18 months, it's going to take off for you." And that's where you find that financial partner, right?
Yes.
So could be sooner than we think even.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hope so. I do.
Yeah, it's definitely some fun times ahead, I think. As long as we're all strapped in for a roller coaster, let's do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ron, thank you so much.
Sure.
Absolutely honored for you to share this, all your thoughts with us today.
All right. Well, you guys are doing a great service for the industry. Keep it up. And, I thank you, as does the board of IRTA. You're doing a terrific job.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us, your ideas and your wisdom with us. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you.
All right.